People often talk about we're heading for a new reset. But I say, what if we're still living in the old reset, but we're waking up and resisting? Nobody's talking about that. But you better believe I am. Hey, yo, peace, it's your man, El Judge, man, coming right back at you with some of that real talk real fast, man. And if you can, please hit like, share, and subscribe, man. It helps your boy out, man. I appreciate that. And leave a comment, too. I'll try to get back at you. Hey, now, peep game, man. What if we are still living in the reset and it's still failing on them? Because let's take this back. The reset, the last reset started in the 15th century, right around 1609. And what happened in 1609? 1609 was the beginning of the American Indian Wars. It started in 1609 and it ended in 1924. Now you may ask, what Indian Wars were going on in the 20s? No one's talking about it, but I'm going to talk about it later. You know what I'm saying? Because, yeah, it's going to trip you out. You're going to do the math and put it together. But, yeah, we're still dealing with this doggone reset thing. Now, prior to 1609, this was already an established country, and it was being ruled by the British Empire. The reason why it was being ruled by the British Empire at the time is because the Asian Empire had begun to crumble. Yes, it began to lose influence, and the British Empire became the new thing. And the Tartarian Empire, it ended a while ago. I'm going to have to talk about that at a later date. But here, in this continent here, this continent was once known. This continent once had many countries in it, and within those countries, it had many provinces, and within those provinces, they had many people who were presidents, who were sultans, who were noblemen and noblewomen, who were kings, queens. They had up there in New York, in Montauk, New York, they were known as the Montauk Pharaohs. And a lot of the places who were being run at that time, they were run by people of color. This is why, man, you hear people, they often they make a fuss over John Hanson. You hear people say like, Barack Obama wasn't the first black president. John Hanson was. I mean, yeah, that is a truth. But the truth is that, man, within those many different provinces all around this doggone continent that we call North America, there were plenty of black presidents and plenty of black governments and plenty of black corporations that were being ran. You know what I'm saying? This was like a black land. And I know people are gonna be like, man, why does everything have to be black? Why can't I just tell you the doggone history and you shut the hell up? Sorry about that, man. I got to clown every now and then. But yeah, there were plenty of black people who were doing their thing here. Now just think about this here. If it were not a bunch of black people running this thing, do you not think that they would have wrote the history and be like, shoot, it was people who looked like me. We was running this thing the whole time. No, you guys are the newcomers. Now let me take a time out for 1 second. I'm gonna say this real fast. Now, the people who we presume to be white today, who call themselves white, many of them had came over here way back after the fall of during the Battle of Constantinople, after the fall of the lower parts of Rome, during the Byzantine times. Now, when the northern region lost the war, they packed up and they put their gully slaves, because over there in that part of Rome, they used to take the people. They looked upon the people of Slovenia as less than them. You know what I'm saying? So they would capture those people and turn them into these things called slaves. Now, when that war ended and the people that were on the north left, they brought fleets and fleets and fleets and fleets of those people over here to the Americas. So and down in the ships were the gully slaves. Heave, ho, heave, ho. And those gully slaves, when they came over here to Americas, some of them ran off and they mixed in with the indigenous people. They was like, you know what, and these were white looking people, but some of them, they were like, man, shoot, this is new land, and they don't know this land. They took off and ran. They're like, I ain't gonna keep being a slave. You know what I'm saying? So white people have been here, man, ever since doggone the 300s or the 400s, because that battle ended at the end of the 300s. Now let's get back to the doggone story. Now, like I said, there were plenty of governments, there were plenty of corporations, and there was big business being set up here, and it was being ruled by the people over there across the Great Pond over there in Great Britain. Because if I said this before, Great Britain took over the empire, the Tartarian Empire, because the Tartarian Empire, they were dirty and they weren't treating the people right, and they fell apart. The people over there in London, this was during the time of Saxon, Coburg, and Golgotha. Saxon, Coburg, and Golgotha, the people who lived over there, they were known as, well, put it this way. One of the original Prince Philips, his father was known as the Black Prince. And this is over there in Europe. And man, you better believe, hold on for a second. Here's this book, Ancient Rome and Modern Britain. I'm reading it backwards. In this book, it talks about the black nobility that once existed in Europe before the amalgamated people got power. This is a good book. It comes in volume 1 and 2. Okay. So now you got resources, and there's plenty of resources. Just go to Google and type in the black nobility of Europe. Don't act stupid. Okay. It was black people running the house of Saxon, Coburg, and Golgotha. But during the switchover, during the reset, and they conquered those people who lived there. And not only were they conquered, some of them were conquered, you know what I'm saying? And so, oh man, this is going to get deep. Some of them were conquered, and some of them iced themselves and their families because they didn't want their families to go through what was getting ready to come. Let me take I'm not going to take a break. I'm going to keep going because I just took a crazy turn here. I just took a real crazy turn. Okay, going, when the wars started and they were taking over the Americas, they had to defeat country by country and state. They had to defeat each state, which was its own country. And hopefully I'm saying this right. They had to defeat the countries, and they had to defeat the states in the countries, and they had to make them bow down to this thing called the United States. I'm jumping around on the timeline. Now, if you live in America, you would notice that there's a lot of penitentiaries, and there are a lot of old insane asylums that look like castles. Now, the reason why they look like castles is because they were castles and people used to live in them. Now, I want you to think about a castle. What do castles have in the basement? They have dungeons where they lock up the doggone mischievous people. So all they did was they captured these doggone palaces, and they captured these kingdoms, and they turned them into prisons. Now, the reason why they turned them into prisons is because they didn't have the proper paperwork to just go in and take over and claim somebody else's land, or claim someone else's property or their authority. So what they would do when they captured the doggone kingdoms or the castles, they would take the kings and whoever it was, the kings, the queens, the noblemen, noble ladies, whoever it was, they would take them and they would lock them up in their own castle. They would turn their home into a prison, and they would say that this person, that we are now the caretakers because this person right here who we captured, he is no longer in mental shape to run the kingdom. That is exactly why a lot of the old prisons look like castles. Now, I'm going to tell you why some of them look like old, what you would call a sane asylum. The reason why some of them look like insane asylums, but they're big castles and stuff, is because they did the same thing. They captured the people. They said that this person was mentally disturbed, so we're going to have to take care of this person. We're going to have to aid to this person, and we're going to take responsibility of the land. But they don't own it. And any of the people who were outside of the kingdom, you know what I'm saying, who still remembered what things was like, and they weren't accepting the reset, the new way of thinking, they would place them inside them asylums, and then they would torture them until they break down and be like, okay, now do you accept our way of thinking? And if they didn't accept their way of thinking, they left them there forever until they died. Okay, now let's go. Oh, man, that was a lot y'all got from me, man. But let's continue, man. Now let's go now. Like I said, the American Indian War. Like I'm jumping all over the place. I'm so sorry, y'all. The American Indian War started in 1609. So their job was to go around and to defeat all these little what you would call countries that existed in North America. And every time they would capture one, it would become known as their system. Later on, that would be a system that became known as the United States. Now, let me take a break for a second. Okay, sorry about that, man. I had to stop for a second and gather my thoughts, man, because I'm all over the place. You know, I'm your average American. You know what I'm saying? My brain just goes in 500 different directions at once. But okay, this newly formed system that they were trying to bring into existence called the United States, their job was to go around and conquer as many of these, to conquer all of the land of North America. Now, some of the people, some of the countries that were ran by melanated people, because like here, like in this country here, the melanated people, they ran what you would call, and there were white people who were doing this as well. You know what I'm saying? And there were other people. They were some of those amalgamated Indians. But anyway, the black people and the other people who were running the country, they had things like marble, they had granite, they had gold, they had silver, they had coal, they had best wood, and they had human resources, and we were shipping these things to different spots around the world, and we were creating money. Now, some of our lands were so elegant and so beautiful that we didn't want anyone to come here, and we knew that these warring people were coming to try to take us out. Now, some of those people, man, they knew that the later Europeans that were coming over here, they knew that they came over here and they were very sickly and they came with disease. So it was a law written that if you are a so-called white European, you are not allowed to even breathe the same air as those black folks who was running things at that damn time. Yeah, it was that serious and the reason why they said you weren't allowed to breathe the same air is not just because of racism, because it was a form of racism against white people, but which was well deserved at that time. You know what I'm saying? But it was a form of health because they came with disease. Now, as this thing that they called the United States, as they started to conquer these doggone different countries, and especially the ones that where they knew that they weren't allowed to even be there because of the disease that they brought, they weren't allowed to be there. When they would capture those places, what they would do, they would put them on display. Now, like I said, the American Indian Wars, 1609 into 1924 on record. So when they would conquer these doggone places, they would make it a feast and a festival. They would invite people from miles and miles around and be like, look here, look, we just conquered this major kingdom right here. This major kingdom right here in Chicago, Illinois. We just conquered this thing. So we want all y'all to come. As many of you can come. We're going to make this into a world's fair. Come see what we did. Look how brave, look how good we are. We conquered these people right here. So they would have these world fairs of all the different places that they conquered, where they knew they were not supposed to be. And then when they had those world fairs, they were taking pictures of all the people there, and they would so it would look like, oh, this is a doggone a white nation. But it wasn't a white nation. It was a nation that was doggone, or a country that was conquered by so-called white people. This is the whole thing about your doggone all those world fairs that you seen going around the doggone United States during those times. Like I said, the American Indian Wars, 1609 to 1924. Yes, that's what that was about. If you look, that's the mystery behind those world fairs. They were coming in there, they were taking pictures, so in the future, people will look at these doggone pictures and be like, oh man, look what those people had, look what those beautiful white people had. And this is and in Chicago, what did they call that? The World's Fair. They said this is the white city. They were erasing the past and setting up the future with a new narrative. But your ass got caught. Yeah. We're still fighting the reset. We're still in the reset, and we're fighting this thing. Because man, the people have to wake up. You can only sleep for so long. If you lay in the bed long enough, you're gonna get sore, and you can only roll over so many times. At some point, you're gonna have to get your ass up out. You're gonna have to wake up and get your ass up out the bed. And that's what we're dealing with right now. People are waking up and getting their asses out the bed. Just think, if those places that they were conquering here in the Americas were doggone were originally created by so-called white people. And man, I know this sounds like division, but man, in order for us to fix this thing, we got to point out the leaks in the boat. If this was their history, they would have been bragging about this the whole time, and you would have seen ancient paintings and drawings of them in those cities. Because before there were paintings, you had those people coming over here from France who were the best artists when it came to being like in news reporting. They were the best, those people in France, because they could paint real fast and draw real fast. It was like an art over there. They would have been came over here and drew pictures of that. You would have seen people in them doggone white cities that won what you call the World's Fair. And then after they conquered the place and they put it on display and did everything, they tore a lot of those places down. The reason why they tore a lot of those things down is because they knew that the future children coming, if they were to see these doggone buildings, it would activate something in their DNA and they would remember. And not only that, a lot of those things had marble statues and doggone uh, pictures and paintings and doggone carvings that pointed to people who look like me. So a lot of them buildings had to go. Now, like I said, I'm jumping around on the timeline. Sorry about this here. What you would call the doggone Civil War, that was basically just a setup. It was a war. The Civil War was about people not holding up to their contracts. They were abusing their contracts and they weren't living up to what they were supposed to be doing, because a lot of people were indentured servants and a lot of people were doggone prisoners of war. Because you better believe when they were going on and they were conquering those nations, they would kill some of the people and then they would take the people and put them to work, and they were looked upon as, and later on we called them slaves, but they were not slaves, they were prisoners of war. This is why I forgot the gentleman's name. He made a famous statement, and the statement went something like this here. He said, unalive the man not. Just kill the man's memory, or just unalive his memory of who he is. It went something like that. Basically, he was saying, if you make the man forget, if you make the man, it's so hard to talk nowadays. If you make the man forget who he is, you can still use the man. But if you take the man and you destroy him, he's no longer useful, because we need people to help us build this land. So yeah, man, that's what happened, man. That's just part of the stuff that was going on. But let me say this before I end this out. The so-called Civil War it was a contractual war. They weren't doing right by contract. It had nothing to do with just so-called freeing slave people. It had something to do with the North wanting to start bringing in industrial power. It had a lot to do with they were trying to form one government, and they didn't. They was forming this United States still, and they did not want people to have sovereign power. I have that right there. And believe me, a lot of those people who owned people who they were going to work during those times, they looked like my black ass too. It was just one of the wealthiest doggone so-called slave owners in the Americas was a person who owned doggone rice fields. And they lived in, was it Mississippi? Yeah, and they looked like me. There were plenty of people who looked like me, who owned people who looked like me, and owned people who looked like some of the people who they call Caucasian. But during the doggone Civil War, what they were doing was they were fighting about that. But the underlying main goal was to take those doggone tanks and to set fire to all of the remnants of the things that the people who looked like me had. They were taking not the tanks, they were taking those cannons and throwing up, because there's parts of South Carolina that looked like Rome at one time. If you watch the movie Django, you're gonna see that lady, and she's looking through a thing that looks like an Etch-a-Sketch. You know, with the old photograph things where you look into it and you have a picture on it. And when she shows a picture, she shows a picture of a black and a white kid in a cotton field, and in the background there's a thing that looks like one of those what they call them, those pantheons or things with all those pillars over there in Rome. It's one of those things behind them. And then if you look at the movie Django and you look at that picture, you'll be like, man, I didn't know they had cotton fields in Rome. They didn't. That was in South Carolina. Hey, yo, man. Hey, man. I'm going to continue this stuff, man. I hope y'all got something out of this here, man. And I'm sorry for jumping around on the timeline. And, man, I am not talking separation. I'm just cleaning up some of the things of the past. Peace and blessings. I'm out.